Let me tell you something that change is possible. The change is possible. If God can change me, trust me, he can change anybody. That night, a rival gang came to my house looking for me. They spray painted 187. Underneath the 187, it said my nickname. They got a green light against you. They want to kill you. The police are looking for you. All of a sudden, this guy jumps out of the bushes. And next thing you know, the gun is to the side of my head. He pulls the trigger. I just remember bleeding out. I told um, I was the youngest out of 5 kids. I was considered the baby in my family. It's crazy to think that, your life as a young kid can be that difficult. I had to be about 6 or 7, and there was constant fighting in my house. I remember one night my father chasing my mother around the house, and the next night my mother chasing my father around the house. You're talking about screaming, shouting, cheating. All these things were going on in my house. And as a young kid, it affected me. Besides the molestation that was happening to me at this time in my life, I felt very hurt. I felt very confused. I felt very lonely. My brothers had each other because they were older, and my sisters had each other because they were older as well. And I really had nobody to talk to about these things that were happening in my house. So I thought this was just the normal thing. Finally came to a place where my parents became divorced. And I remember going before the judge, and the judge sitting me in a chair and asking me basically what was my decision. If I wanted to go with my mother or if I wanted to go with my father. And to be honest with you, there was so much that was going on with my family that I didn't know what to say because I didn't want to hurt anybody. There was so much hurt within me at this time. And finally, the judge made a decision for me to go with my mother for a season. And at this time, my father moved to the city of Rialto. It was very hard for me. I felt like I had nobody to turn to or to talk to. I had to be about 8 or 9 years old, maybe 10 at this time, and I started doing things. I started having outbursts. I started having a lot of anger, rebellion. I started taking off from my mother's house, running away. This was a way I believe that maybe all the things that were happening around me, this is kind of how I let them out by doing things like that. And it made me feel a little bit better. But the repercussions that came to me when I came back home were another story. There came a time where my mother just couldn't handle me anymore, so she shipped me off to my father's, and I had to be about 11 or 12 years old. And the reason why my father moved to the city of Rialto was because at that time, the gangs in the city of Whittier were in an uprise, and he wanted to move away from that as well. Rialto was in the city of San Bernardino County, and that was very far from the place where I grew up. So I ended up moving with my father. And you need to hear me when I say this, that my father, he worked a very busy schedule, a lot of overtime. And my father was a womanizer. So when my father would come home, he would bring different women all the time, throughout the week. And then sometimes on the weekends, I wouldn't see him. I was a young kid, so I started fending for myself, trying to do things like a grown up would do. I started cooking, taking care of myself, getting myself to school because nobody was there. And there were some kids that were up the street from me. I remember this very clearly. They did all the normal things, would play football, basketball, hang out with each other around the neighborhood. And this was something that I wanted. I didn't have anybody. From time to time, my brothers or my sisters would come visit my dad, but that was very briefly, and then they would take off. And I was looking, there's this old saying that, you're looking for love in all the wrong places. And I didn't understand at this time that I was headed towards a wrong place in my life. On Friday nights, a couple of these kids would take off. And I was always intrigued about where they would go. And finally, eventually, they started asking me. They started asking me, hey, you want to come with us on a Friday night? But you need to understand that that, I was very fearful of my father. My father was a big man, 6'3", 6'4", about 370 pounds. And growing up as a kid, if I did things wrong, man, he'd grab this belt in the closet and, man, he would lay it on you. So that was always in the back of my mind, but I kept on hanging out with these guys. And finally, there came a Friday where they asked me, and I said, you know what? I thought to myself, my dad's not here anyways. I might as well go out and hang out with these guys. And I remember they took me to this backyard party in the city of Rialto. I mean, the backyard was full at that time, and something intrigued me that night. There was a group of individuals that were in the corner, bald head, tattoos. It seemed like they had a camaraderie or a brotherhood. And this intrigued me. It also looked like, they had each other's back. They supported one another, and they cared about one another. And this is something that I wanted that, I didn't have within my family. I wanted to be part of something. But see, the thing is that they were part of a local gang. At this time in the city of Rialto, there was a gang called Southside Rialto, and it was the biggest gang that was in that city. And from there on out, every Friday I would go to backyard parties, and I started hanging out with these group of individuals. And there was an accident that happened, and unfortunately, 2 individuals were killed. And so I remember going to the funeral and then going to the reception. And I'm sitting there at the reception, and I'm thinking about the things that had just happened. And I thought to myself, it's a perfect time to get jumped into this neighborhood. So I remember at that time, the cameras, they had the Polaroid cameras with the black and white. You kind of shake them, and it kind of developed very quickly. And so we all took a picture together. And in that picture, I threw up a gang sign. I knew if I threw up a gang sign that they wouldn't have a choice but to jump me into that gang. And I remember they took a picture, and all of a sudden I remember them starting to shake the photo and then started to pass it around, and they started talking within themselves. And the thing that they were talking about is that I hadn't been jumped into that gang, but I was throwing the gang sign already. Next thing you know, I remember getting hit on the side of the face, falling to the floor, getting up and fighting with 2 individuals. And then I remember taking off my shirt and then walking into the street and calling everybody out to go jump me in. I wanted to be part of this group. I wanted to be part of a family. And it seemed like these guys always hung around each other, and there's no fear. Everybody feared these individuals at the parties. You know what I mean? Everybody didn't want them there because, number one, they started trouble. And number two, they were scared of them. And they had each other's back. And I wanted to be part of that. But I remember going across the street and then being jumped in by about 10 individuals back there. And at this time, this is when my journey began in the gang. And you have to hear me about this. My family, they were never part of a gang. My father, being young, he hung around a gang called Florence 13 right here in Los Angeles. But he went to the Marines and changed his life and stuff like that. But overall, my brothers and sisters, they weren't part of a gang or nothing. For me, it was kind of like a new journey for me. So I remember hanging around with these guys all the time and hearing words like respect, revenge, payback, putting in work, having heart. And these are all the things that I wanted. And these guys were always together. We always did everything together in groups. And I was looking for a family at that time, and that really made me feel comfortable around these guys because I knew that they had my back. I had to be about 12 or 13 when I got jumped into this gang, and I started committing crimes, little crimes at this time. I started stealing cars, started doing robberies, started hitting, houses, different things like that, and getting caught with guns as well as a young kid, and that eventually ended me up in juvenile hall through the system. And when I'd get out, sometimes my family would try to send me somewhere to another family's house or whatever, but that never worked. Only for a season, I'd come right back and commit the same crimes all over again. It eventually snowballed for me as a young kid. I ended up doing time in, jail, went through the YA system real quick, and then went to camps and did camps as a juvenile there. and when I get out, it was pretty cool because like my homeboys would treat me a little bit different because I started having some respect in the neighborhood for putting in work and, for doing time as a young kid. I wanted that, I wanted them, to say, hey, well, hey, that guy is down. That guy has heart. He's done time for the neighborhood. I wanted all this stuff. I wanted the notoriety of the gang as well. And I started doing drugs, started doing all these different things. And I remember, like, as a young kid, a family coming to visit my father, bald head, baggy pants, stuff like that. And they would always ask me a question like, you okay? What's going on? You want to talk about anything? And, they had never been there for me prior. So I would really shut them out. And they would say, well, you're the black sheep of the family. And I would say, yeah, I'm the black sheep. I just do things different. And I remember as a young kid, it started getting very bad in the neighborhood. I started kicking up a lot of dust, putting in a lot of work. And I remember I had to be maybe about 17 years old this one night. And I came home and the lights were off. And I remember I go into the house and my father is laying on the front room floor with my stepmom. He had remarried at this time, and I have a baby sister. And I remember my dad having a shotgun on his stomach laying down, and he gets up and he said, son, they're here. They came looking for you. I think they're in the backyard. I had a couple of homeboys with me. We had guns. I mean, we were ready to do this. I remember running in the backyard and seeing nobody there, coming around back to the front, turning on the porch light. And I remember they had spray painted on my father's house. They had spray painted 187, and underneath the 187, it said my nickname. 187 means that there's going to be a homicide. So that night, a rival gang came to my house looking for me. And my dad did the best thing he could do to protect who he had, my stepmom and my baby sister, by having a gun that night. And when I walked out of that house, the only thing that I thought about was payback and revenge. And things kept on getting bad for me. And, eventually I ended up catching a prison term. Crazy thing about this, now that I'm in prison, this is something that we call this in the neighborhood graduation or college. As a young kid, as a youngster running around there in the neighborhood, this is always the place where you want to get to, is prison. If I lived a normal life, I'd want to go through school, and then I'd want to go to college. But for us in the neighborhood, basically college for us was the penitentiary. So I felt like I had made it. I felt like finally I'm here in this place. And then my journey in prison began. I remember I had to be like one of the first nights I was there in prison. I'm in a penitentiary. I was in Chino. And I remember I go there, and at this time, there's, a lot of things happening. There's an overflow. So what I mean about overflow is that you got parolees and you got murderers. And, it was so packed at that time that, they're putting people all together. And so I'm in the gym at this time on the East Yard. And I roll up and I could feel this tension. And that's one thing about prison is you could feel the tension when something's going to happen. But I just rolled up and I was just like, what's going on? I'm thinking to myself, I don't know anybody right there and stuff. So it's a little different for me. But my whole mentality is just like, I'm here. I finally made it. I'm going to get the respect from my homeboys. I want to get the respect from those that are incarcerated here. That was my whole mentality. And I remember we come back from chow and I can still feel this tension. All of a sudden, I hear kind of like people, it seemed like they were running, but they were walking because you're in a gym and the floor is wooden. So when you hear stuff, it's pretty loud. And it got closer and closer. And I'm on a bottom bunk and I got my bunkie above me. And I thought they were coming for me, but they're coming for my bunkie. And I just remember them stabbing my bunkie and stuff, and then them pulling me and telling me, hey, we got to take you with us, otherwise they're going to try to roll you up for this. So I ended up going into the back with a whole bunch of people, these guys that were involved in that. And I remember next thing I just hear like the gunner that was walking up on top, he started shooting, pop, 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 pop. It's kind of like, it's not a gun, it's kind of like a pop gun or whatever. And what happens is like when they shoot these bullets come out, these rounds come out and they explode and stuff all over the place, and they hit you and it hurts. It hurts really bad. So I remember him screaming and then boom, boom, boom. But you hear that all over and stuff. And next thing you know, I'm on the back, I'm on the floor, and then getting rolled up with a whole bunch of guys because of what had happened. And I remember going down to the Sally Port there in the East Yard in Chino and thinking to myself, I will never die here. There's no way. Whatever I have to do to survive, I'm going to survive, because there's no way that I'm going to allow that, what I just saw, to happen to me. And so anyways, I did my time or whatever. I ended up getting released. So about 1997, I was released from a prison. I believe it was Soledad State Prison. And I'm getting out. I'm healthy. I'm feeling good. I want to see the homies. I want to party and all that stuff. So I go and I walk across the city. My dad lived on one part and the neighborhood was on the other side, and it wasn't too far. So I remember walking that day to the neighborhood and stuff. And I get there to the neighborhood and all my homeboys are there. I'm hugging them, telling me they love me. Welcome home. What do you need? I felt good. I felt good that night. And there was a party on the next block. A couple girls were there and stuff, and they invited me. And I remember my homeboy that night telling me, he said, hey, he goes, hey, you need a gun? You want a gun? And I was just like, nah, I'm good. I go, I'm going to be on the next block. I go, I'll just whistle real quick. I'll whistle, and if you guys can hear me if anything happens, but I'll be good. I'm solid. I'm straight. So I went over there that night and I started chilling out with these girls, started drinking, started getting loaded. Things were happening. It was all good. It was all good that night. And I remember hearing some noises in the bushes, but I was just like, don't trip. You're solid. You're straight. You just got out, and you're going to be fine. And when I would get out of prison, there was always things that would happen. Many rival gangs wanted to kill me because of all the things that I was doing out there in the streets. And I remember one night my homeboys getting pulled over and them talking to me later on. And they're like, hey, the police pulled us over. And they said that the gangs right here in Rialto, they got a green light against you and that they want to kill you. The police are looking for you. And they wanted us to tell you that. And that's what's happening. They'll probably end up going to your house looking for you as well. I mean, stuff like this was going on in the streets all the time for me. I was out there kicking up a lot of dust, go to prison, come out. I try to do the same things. And eventually that night, like I said, I heard the noises in the bushes, but I just thought it was nothing. About 1:30, I asked these girls to take me home. I jump in this truck. So there's a driver, there's a girl sitting next to me, and I'm against the door. All of a sudden, this guy jumps out of the bushes. And next thing you know, the gun is to the side of my head. He pulls the trigger, and quickly, I remember I turned my head. One of the bullets went and was lodged in the back of my skull, and the other went into the cab of the truck. I remember that night. It was crazy, kind of like the movies that you would see. I mean, it was foggy. It was cold, and this is what happened to me. I just remember falling on the girl's lap next to me as I was sitting down, and I just remember bleeding out. I'm freaking out a little bit. I knew I'd gotten shot. I've been shot 2 times prior to this one. And I remember hearing this ringing in my head, like a loud buzzing noise. Zzz, it kept on going and going. And I remember when I was on this girl's lap, I'm looking at the mirror and I could see this individual in the back of the truck. Looked like he had a pop gun or something like that. You know what a pop gun is back in the neighborhood, we'd put some things together and we'd shoot these things, or we'd bury them, or we'd have them somewhere. So that way, if something had happened, we can always pull these out and use those. And that's what it looked like he had that day. And I remember he was trying to reload it, and I could see him. And I told the girl I couldn't move. I'm bleeding out all over the place. These girls are screaming, and I thought I was paralyzed. I was just like, hey, you have to go. I told her, you have to move the truck. He's coming back. He's going to try to finish me off. And I couldn't move. I'm kind of starting to trip out a little bit about what happened to me that night. And I remember the girl taking off. When we go to a stop sign somewhere in Rialto, and all of a sudden I had a moment. I had a moment where I'm laying down in this girl's lap. I'm bleeding out. I have all these different thoughts to myself. I haven't manned up. I haven't kept a job. I didn't know how to write a check. I never used a credit card. All these different things were going through my mind at that moment. I was thinking to myself, God, this is how it's going to end for me. And then suddenly, this crazy thing happened to me. All of a sudden, I remember this thing coming up. And it seemed like there were slides. It was like a circle. And there was moments from my life. And every single moment, it had like something that had happened to me from the time I was a young kid to my present day. And in these slides was a story of what had happened. And I experienced every single moment so fast, like within a second, boom. And I experienced everything and I felt the emotion and boom, another one pop up. And I experienced, but there was like, there had to be at least 100, 150, but every single one I experienced so quick. And then all of a sudden this came over me and I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm not going to make it. I started tripping because of what I saw. And I just remember this girl like running red lights and getting me to the hospital. I get to the hospital in San Bernardino and stuff. And then I remember we pull up, she goes on the curb and they're yelling and screaming. I remember security guard coming, opening up the door. He sees all the blood all over me. This guy just, boom, passes out on the floor. And I remember after that, I could see as I was laying down on her lap, the door was open. I could see the nurses and the doctors kind of running up to the car and asking me what happened. And I'm like, I got shot. They're like, can you move? I go, no, I think I'm paralyzed. I can't. And so they grab me and they kind of pull me onto the gurney and they take me into the back. They take me into the back, and it seemed kind of like a movie, where you see the lights passing over, the doctors around you. And I'm thinking to myself, what's going to happen to me? Dang, am I going to die? Is my life over with? I'm thinking about all these things. And finally we get into the back. We get into the back and they put these tubes in me. And next thing you know, all the police from Rialto come in. And they start asking me questions, but I got all this stuff on me. They're like, well, who did it? Who did it? Who did this? Who did that? And I remember one of the doctors saying, he needs attention right now. And I remember them going out of the room. But there was one police officer. I remember he grabbed my hand. He grabbed my hand. And he said, hey, you're going to be okay, man. You're going to make it. You're going to make it. Whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Don't fall asleep. You're going to be okay. And I remember I was cold and they covered me. I'm sitting there and I'm getting really tired, like really, really super tired. I'm getting really tired. And next thing you know, I'm out. I'm in this place now. And it's hard to describe this place, but it seemed like there was stages of darkness and this fear was gripping me. And as I went further into this darkness, the greater the fear became over me. There's nothing that I could say about it, but it was a quenching fear. Like I had fought some big dudes in my life, man, and I was fearful, but this fear that I'm telling you about was a crazy fear, a fear that I've never felt before in my life. And it seemed like as I got down deeper into the darkness, the greater this fear became. And I didn't want to go, but there was something that was behind me and it was pushing me into the deeper darkness. It seemed like it was a corridor or something like that, but I know it was dark and I felt like I was by myself and all these feelings as well were coming over me. And I remember as I went down into the deeper darkness, I heard voices. And the crazy thing about this is that some of these voices, they sounded familiar. Like I knew these people, but I couldn't pinpoint who it was. And I remember this one guy way down in the deeper darkness. He was saying, help me, help me, help me. And next thing you know, I woke up. I woke up with nurses and doctors all around me and all this stuff all over my body. And I remember I started going into convulsions on the bed as my body was just reacting. And I remember they had to strap me down. I'm thinking to myself as I lay on this gurney, I'm like, I just had a moment. I had a moment, but I knew I did, but I'm in the neighborhood. I'm an active gang member. And it's like, who can I share this with? What just happened to me? I knew something had happened, but I didn't know really what it was. And I kept that with me. I kept that with me for a long time. The things that had happened to me, because if I tried to tell my homeboys, they would have been like, hey, homie, you tripping. You tripping. You on a good one. We don't believe anything you're saying. Maybe you need to get some sleep, some rest or something like that. But yeah, I kept that to myself. And I remember about a week later, getting out of the hospital, I remember going home and seeing my father. You know what? It gets me every time. Going in and seeing my father fall to his knees, crying. My dad was a big man. You have to remember that. And he's telling me, son, when are you going to stop? You know that you're going to die. You're not going to live. You're such a young man. I love you and care about you, and you're making some bad decisions out there. And honestly, I almost got caught up in the moment. Like, man, I'm hurting my family. My brothers and sisters, they don't even want to be around me because of activity that's in my life, in and out of prison, the raids at the house, the shootings. My father never expressed this to my brothers and sisters. He kept this very quiet about the stuff that was happening there. So I'm thinking about all these things. And then all of a sudden, I started thinking about payback and revenge. My heart was so wicked. And my mind, the intentions was just like, oh, I'm going to pay back this person for what he did to me. Yeah, I remember getting up that day, just kind of like hugging my dad and saying everything was going to be all right, going right back out there into the neighborhood again. And eventually end up going back to prison again. I go back to prison, and at this time, things are kind of popping off in Chino at this time. And I remember going back to GP side and back to the gym again. And, these things that happened to me, I had an experience, didn't want to tell anybody, but here I am in prison again. And I remember what I said, that whatever I have to do to survive, I'm going to do. I remember there was a group of individuals there, and strong dudes, strong homies. And I was drawn to them. And I started hanging out with these individuals, started playing pinochle every day. We'd work out together, play cards. And I remember this person coming up to them as I sat at a table. And this person brought paperwork. And when he brought the paperwork, he said, what do I have to do to clear this up? And when I'm sitting at that table, I'm thinking to myself, what's going on? Now, I knew exactly what was going on, but for him to bring the paperwork to the individuals I was playing with, I knew they had to be connected to somebody. So they grab the paperwork and they tell him, hey, we'll talk to you in a while. And, the handshakes happened. He walked away. And we're playing cards. And I remember them pulling out a piece of paper. And on this paper, it said Southsiders and it said Sureños on it, right? And they go, well, they're like, hey, homie, we need to know who you are. Are you a Southsider or are you a Sureño? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I want to be a Sureño. And they said, I go, well, so what do I have to do? They said, just put your name down here. So I remember putting my name down on that side. And little did I know what I got myself into. So I remember a couple of days had passed. I'm still there in the yard. We're hanging out with each other. And then all of a sudden there was a kite. What a kite is an instruction. And at this time in we call Palm Hall or Bottomas, right there in Chino, there were some big homies there that were connected to a prison gang. And on the kite, when they opened it up, it had my name. And they were like, hey, it has your name on it. And I started freaking out. I'm like, what do you mean it has my name on it? I thought I did something wrong or something was going to happen. We all read it together. And apparently there was somebody that was in the hole that knew me from the yard and knew me from the streets. And this individual that brought the paperwork that day, he needed to be dealt with. His paperwork was upside down. There were some charges on there that aren't allowed in prison for you to be there on this yard. And I remember they're like, well, you're up. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm up? What we want you to do is we want you to keep this guy close to you. We want you to eat with him, walk the yard with him, friend him. And then when it comes time, we want you to hit him. What that means is that they wanted me to stab him. There's an order that came down to stab him, get him off the yard, clean him up. And at that moment, I started freaking out. Inwardly, outwardly, I was content and strong and whatever needs to be done. But inwardly, I was thinking to myself, what did I just get myself into? Here we go. So I remember I probably didn't sleep for about 2 days after this decision was made. And, I wasn't going to go alone on this. There was somebody else to go with me. And so the time came where this had to take place. And let me just say this, it was a big mess. It was a big mess. I ended up going to the hole, and eventually I ended up getting out. Again, and I came back to the outs, and here we go again. I get back out, and it was just like I had respect for my homeboys. They had heard the things that had transpired in prison. They knew that, I had put in work. They knew I had done all these different things as well. It made me feel proud. It made me feel honored. And this was the stuff I was craving. I wanted to be still part of something. I wanted to be part of the family. I wanted other individuals to know that, hey, when they say my name, that dude has heart. That guy's putting work in prison and stuff like that. So that happened for a while, and eventually did some stuff out there, got caught with a gun, carried concealed weapon, loaded firearm as well, and ended up going back to prison. And when this happened, I was out there running amok, kicking up dust, doing a whole bunch of stuff. And I remember being surrounded by the police, and the police telling me, hey, Martinez, you're washed up. You're washed up this time. You're never going to get out. You're done. That's it. Your life is over with and stuff. And I remember at this time, I'm back in Chino, the reception center as well. And I'm sitting there in the cell. And I remember days are going by, weeks are going by, and we hit about the 43rd, 44th day or somewhere around there. And I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was in as the governor at the time. You're talking 2005. I remember sitting there in the cell and thinking to myself, well, this governor passed a new act. It's called the Miranda Act. So if you hadn't been seen for 45 days, they hadn't put a parole hold on you or a charge on you, then they had to kick you out. I'm sitting there in the cell, and then all of a sudden I fish a line. What fishing is that, somebody from a different cell is sending you instruction or a kite. It could be a whole bunch of different things. But I remember receiving it from the bottom. I pick it up, I open up, and it was instructions about a hit that had to happen, in where I was at. And at this time, I'm in Calusa, and we're slammed down. There's some stuff that had happened prior for me rolling up. Supposedly I had all these different charges on me. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, this is home for me now. I'm never going to get out. They said I'm washed up. All these charges come against me. And then I received this kite, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I'll kill this guy. I'll get a hold of him with somebody else, and I'll just do my rest of my life, in prison. And to be honest with you, I just thought that my life was pretty much washed up. I didn't think I'd ever become anything. I thought that being in prison, it was just my life now. I don't think I really had tried prior to that to live a normal life, because I didn't know what normal was. So being part of a gang and doing all these things, to me, I didn't realize that. This is what I wanted. I wanted to do the rest of my life. I hadn't been a father to my kids anyway, so who cares? That was my whole thing. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, cool. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to kill this guy, just do the rest of my life in prison. And I remember the 45th day. I remember I'm asking the CO early in the morning, hey, what's going on? What are my charges? He said gun charges, this charges, that charges. And she's like, you know what, Martinez? We don't know. We don't know anything that's going on. And I said, all right, cool. So time passes, thinking to myself, in a day or two, where I have to kill this guy. That night, I remember my cell pops open. The CO comes. She has paperwork, and she's like, Martinez, you're going home. I was like, what? I'm going home? I thought I had charges. You're talking about a gun. You're talking about all these different things that are going on, and there's no charges? No, she goes, your parole officer hasn't even put a hold on you either. She's like, because of the new act that came out, we have to release you. So I remember, I was tripping. I'm tripping. I'm just like, man, I'm going to get out. I'm going to run. I'm going to Mexico. Those were just my thoughts. I didn't even know how I was going to get there. And I was just like, I'm going to get out. I'm going to run, take off, we'll get loaded, part of my homeboys. Same old thing. The same old thing. And so I remember getting out and stuff, going down to the bus stop and thinking about my mom. During my prison time, I can honestly tell you that my mom would faithfully write me and send me money at least once a month. And none of my family would. And I understood that. I understood that they didn't want to be part of that. They didn't understand that. They just thought I was crazy, vocal, and all these different things. And I get it. But my mom kind of always said, mijo, or son, I believe one day you'll change. And I would be like, oh, okay, mom. Okay. Yeah, I just respect because that was mom. So, and she had told me, she said, son, when you get out, come look for me. Just do me that one thing. So, okay. And my parole had changed down to back to the city of Whittier. So I went to go see my mother. I remember knocking on the door. She's staying with a friend. And I remember the friend opening up the door. And at this time, I had tattoos all over my face. You know, I got a laser treatment. She opened the door and she's just like, who are you? She saw me as probably as a little kid and stuff. And she's like, no, you can't be here and stuff. And then I remember my mom like pushing the door open and then coming out with a bag. And she's like, come on, son, let's go. So I remember that night, like we had cousins supposedly that stood in the city of Whittier. And I remember going like to each house that day and stuff. And then my mom knocking and they're like, hey, can me and my son stay here just for the night? And they're like, they would see me, my change outs from prison and all the tattoos. And they're like, no, you can't stay here. And we did that at least 4 or 5 houses. Finally, eventually, my mom ended up borrowing money to stay in a motel that night. And I remember she's like, Mio, she's like, I don't want you to go back, son. You know, I want the best for you, but I can't force you to do anything. She's like, can you do me a favor? She's like, can we just talk? So I remember me and my mom, like, just talking about life that night for hours. Until about 3 a.m, we fell asleep, woke up, and she had gotten a car. She bought a car, and she's like, do me another favor. She's like, go see your parole officer. So I'm like, cool. All right, whatever you say, Mom. I said, but after that, you're taking me back to Rialto. I go to the homies, and she's just like, whatever. She said, but just do me that one thing. So I ended up going to the parole office. So my parole officer wasn't there that day, okay? There was an officer of the day. And I remember I'm sitting down with him, and he's like reading my rap sheet, going through the things, and he's like, Martinez, he said, he goes, I know that might sound cliche, Martinez, but aren't you tired? Aren't you tired of just being tired? And, you know, at that moment in my life, I was just like, not really. I'm good. I go, why, what's up? And he goes, well, looking at your rap sheet, he's like, this is pretty much all you do. You're in, you're out, you're in, you're out and stuff. And he goes, and it looks like you're hanging around with some individuals, you know, um, who can get you in some serious trouble. And he goes, and if you continue to hang around with these individuals, eventually they're going to turn their back on you and they're going to kill you. And I was just like, what? I'm like, whatever and stuff. And I said, so what do I got to do? And he goes, well, you know what? I'm going to talk to you. He's like, your officer isn't there. He said, but look it, I'm going to give you something. He goes, I'm going to give you a phone number. I'm going to give you a phone number to a men's home. He goes, and if you're tired, then you're going to call this phone number and you go into men's home. And I had no idea what a men's home was. And I'm like, well, what is that? He goes, it's a place where you can stay. He goes, if you got nowhere to stay here, he's like, you can stay there. And I was just like, I go, well, what are the rules? What do I got to do? And he goes, okay, well, look, I'm going to tell you something. He goes, it's a Christian men's home. And I started busting up. I started laughing. Throughout the time in my life, being in the neighborhood, I had a couple of homeboys that were consistent that got saved. And then for some reason, I didn't know, they'd come and see me. One day he came to my house. I remember he knocked on my door, boom, boom, boom. And so I'm like, who is it? He says his name. He said, hey, I need to talk to you. I remember I opened up the door. I have a gun in my waistband. You know, I have a beer in my hand. You know, I'm loaded. And he goes, hey, he goes, me and my church are on a fast. We've been praying and God spoke to me. And he goes, he told me that he has a plan for you. This gets me too. You know, little did he know that inwardly I was hurting. I was hurting. I was just so caught up in the gang and all the things that we did as a gang. And, you know, I was tired, but I never wanted to admit I was tired. And he tells me this. And I remember I took a step back and it shook me up. It seemed like it almost sobered me. And I remember telling him, I'm like, if God has a plan for me, then why am I here with a gun in my waistband, loaded with a beer, in and out of prison? So it was hard for me to believe that word that he gave me. But this would happen consistently in my life, where I had my homeboys would come and tell me that God had a plan for me. I'm sitting there in the parole office. I grabbed the number and I put it in my pocket. I'm like, whatever, man. And he goes, so what are you going to do? I'm like, I'll probably just go on the run. I'll probably stay out for 30 days and go absconding. But absconding means that you're violated. You don't check in again or whatever. And then they put a warrant out for your arrest for parole violation. So I remember jumping in the car with my mom and I'm like, hey, Mom, take me back to the neighborhood. So I know how to get to San Bernardino and stuff. So we jump on the freeway. We jump on the freeway and we end up going the wrong way. And then I had a moment. I remember sitting in the car, I don't have much stuff with me, bag of hygiene, a pair of sweats, some slippers or whatever. That's all I have. Mom didn't have no money. And so then all of a sudden I heard this voice. And you got to remember that this isn't something that was learned. None of my family are Christians. None of my family are in church. And I heard this voice. And this voice said, "For the wages of sin is death." And all of a sudden, this fear came over me again. Like that fear that I experienced when I got shot in the head. And I believe I went to a place called hell. I had that fear again come over me. And I remember just started weeping in the car. And see, I'm not a crier. I don't cry. And I just started weeping in the car. My mom looks at me. She's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "You know what? I can't do it no more. I can't do it." I said, do me a favor, get off the freeway, go to a phone. At this time, there was no cell phones. We're talking 2005. So they had the phones that were on the sidewalks. You put a quarter in it, you call. I remember we get off the freeway, we find one, and I call this men's home. And I call the men's home, and I'm like, "Hey, my name's John Paul." I'm like, "Hey, do you guys have room?" And they said, "We're full at the moment, but for you, we'll make room." I remember hanging up the phone. I remember my mom taking me to this home. I didn't know what a Christian was. I didn't know what to expect. So I get dropped off at the front fence. It's a wrought iron fence, kind of high. I remember going up to the front. I only have a couple of things. All of a sudden, these two guys are walking. And I'm looking at them. Bald head, tattoos all over their face. And I'm like, what is this? What is going on? I remember one of them opened up the door and he hugged me. He said, "Welcome to the home, brother. We love you. We got a place for you here." And see, I'm not a hugger either. So when that happened to me, I kind of like stepped back because my heart is so cold from all the things that I've done in prison and on the streets. And then this happens to me. But I can honestly say this, that when that happened to me, I felt like the hug was genuine, that it was made from a place of love. And I remember them grabbing me, kindly and saying, "Come on, bro, we want to show you." So I remember them taking me back into a back room where a washer and dryer is at, right? And then them saying this prayer with me. They're like, "Hey, do you want to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior?" And I'm like, "Well, I think I've done everything else in my life. Why not try this?" And they're like, "Well, we're not forcing you, but we're just asking you." And I'm like, "Let's do this." So I remember I'm saying the prayer. I'm in this back room and I could see all the things that are in this home, right? Double bunks. And then there's a weight pile where you can lift weights in the backyard. And then in the corner, I see this guy with a bag of soups making a spread, something that I saw in prison. And I'm just like, man, I'm home. I'm home. This is the place I want to be, you know? And so that began my journey, within the home. And I could be honest with you today that I didn't completely surrender till about 3 months in the home. And I remember one morning coming to the sanctuary. And we'd pray every morning, we'd see songs, and I thought that was really weird because I'm going through this transformation process. I'm not sure if this is real, if this is going to keep me, if this is going to hold me. Like I said, I did have some homeboys that were saved and would serve God, but I also had some homeboys that would serve God for a season and end up back at the connection. So I wasn't sure about all this stuff that was happening. And I remember the overseer was like, "Hey, you need to pray." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, you need to pray." And I didn't know how to pray, but I remember just going down there and praying, getting on my knees. And like about 20 minutes in, man, all of a sudden I just started crying, man. I started crying. I have snot coming out my nose. My shirt's dirty. And I'm in there with like 42 other gang members that have given their life to the Lord. You know what I mean? And here I am, this tough guy, this guy in and out of prison. And here I am just crying, just weeping before the Lord. I can honestly tell you that I felt like God actually came down and touched my heart and touched my mind. I felt like the weight had lifted off of me and I felt a freedom. It's hard to explain it, but it's a freedom that I never felt before. The type of freedom where I don't have to look over my back anymore. And this is something that I've wanted too. because, being in the neighborhood, you're always concerned about, who's going to shoot you, who's going to do you wrong, who's going to betray you, you know, and when that happened to me, I just felt this sense of freedom. You know, I was in there with a whole bunch of guys. I get up after having this moment. I come out the sanctuary. I'm talking to these guys. I'm like, well, how long was I in there for? They said, man, you're in there for a few hours. And I'm just like blown away. I've been in there for 5-6 hours praying. I couldn't believe it. I had another moment with God in this home. And I remember a couple of months later coming back to this place in the altar, fasting and praying. This time I have both feet in, I'm surrendered. I'm like, God, what is it you want me to do? I want to please you. I want to obey you. I want to do what you want me to do. What is your will for me? And I remember him taking me to the book of Isaiah. I believe it's chapter 61, where it says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon thee, and have anointed thee to preach the gospel to the poor. And all of a sudden I had another moment. All these things came over me. And I'm like, you're calling me to preach the gospel? I go, don't you know what I've done? Don't you know where I've came from? Don't you know all the people I've hurt? All these things. Don't you know that I'm not studied? I didn't feel qualified. I'm from the hood. I got tattoos on my face, my arms are sleeved down. I'm still on parole. And I realized at that moment that those things don't matter to God. What he did for us and what he did for me on that cross, the forgiveness of sins, to know that all my past, present, and future sins has been washed away. And I thought to myself, you're calling me. And I embraced my call then. Went to ministry school for a couple of years after I got out of the home, started doing ministry in downtown LA, started going to, I believe it was the LA Rescue Mission. In a 3-year span, I brought over 4,000 people to the Lord. In 20 years now, I'm celebrating this year, 2025. I've brought over 17,000 people to the Lord. I've lost track. I've spoken on platforms. I've preached in churches. I've done many different things, and I'm just honored, all because I embraced my calling. And the first thing that it was with God is that he forgave me for my sin. He forgave me for my sin. He washed away all my sin. And I'm so thankful now. I have a beautiful wife, family, kids. I enjoy my life now. I enjoy the things that I do. I wake up every morning knowing that my life has been transformed by the power of God and by his grace. And I'm so thankful. If you've heard this message today and you relate to this message, maybe it's, your mother, your father, your daughter, or your son, or maybe it's a cousin that you're related to. Let me tell you something, that change is possible. The change is possible. If God can change me, trust me, he can change anybody. So I just want to encourage you that if this ministered to you any way, shape, or form, or maybe it's you. Maybe somehow you tuned on to this message. Maybe you scrolled through YouTube or some type of social media platform out there and you saw this word. Maybe you're in sin. Maybe you're doing things that, that related to me when I was out there running the streets and stuff. I want you to know that God has a call for you. God has a call for you. You may not see it or sense it at this moment, but I'm telling you, God is going to pull you out. If that's you and you're saying, how can I get into the kingdom? How can I be a son or a daughter in Christ? Well, I want to lead you in a prayer, a salvation prayer. This is my assignment for those that are watching, what God has called me to do. And just repeat this prayer after me. It's very simple, very easy. Father, forgive us for our sins. We accept your Holy Spirit. Now give me the strength to go forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.